Hey everybody, so it's been a while since I made a new video, and so today I want to talk about a subject matter that I think will be able to help people on pretty much any topic, how not to get fooled, how to see between the lines and figure out when you're being lied to and when you're not. And let's be honest, you're probably being lied to 99.9% of the time. Well, especially if you're listening to the government and to the mainstream media. So today I want to talk about propaganda. What's propaganda? How not to get fooled by propaganda? How to recognize propaganda? So let's just start with what's the definition of propaganda? So propaganda, the definition is information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. So that's pretty straightforward. They're twisting facts, lying, whatever, to get you to believe in something to support their cause. So this sounds pretty familiar to something else that I've heard of, and it's called public relations. Most of you have probably heard of it, as almost any big company and government has a, public relations department. Our federal government has the Minister of Public Relations. So what does public relations mean? So let's look at a definition of that. And that is the professional maintenance of a favorable public image by a company or other organization or a famous person. So, let that sink in for a little bit. That sounds a lot like propaganda to me. Professional maintenance of a favorable public image sounds a lot like propaganda to me. So I want to take a quick look at a man named Edward Bernays. He is considered the father of public relations, at least in our modern era. So Edward Bernays started public relations. Well, he made public relations what it is now after World War II. Like Henry Ford had used, a little bit of public relations prior to that to have like a more favorable image with people. But Edward Bernays was the first to take this on a bigger level, to reach the masses and to sway mass opinions and what they think about certain subjects, certain people, certain governments. So I just want to read a quick quote from Edward Bernays. And he says, the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. So what this is saying is that it's important to manipulate the constituents in a democracy. So why is that so important? This is very important for anyone that's in power, because this way, they get the populace to be obedient. They get the populace to believe the politicians and everyone is on their side and doing what's best for them. And it gets the populace to not ask questions. They're like, oh, these guys are doing a wonderful job. They're looking out for us and they're keeping us safe. When in reality, it's quite the opposite. So Bernays was the father of public relations. Do you see where this is going? Right after World War II, he came out with a book called Propaganda. And it pretty much outlines this whole thing, everything I'm talking about, and a lot more. So if you want to look more into propaganda, I'd recommend starting with his book named Propaganda. So in this book, it goes on to say, it is possible to regiment the public mind every bit as much as the army regiments their bodies. These new techniques of regimentation of minds, he said, had to be used by the intelligent minorities in order to make sure that the slobs stay on the right course. And we can do it now because of these new techniques. I can't say it in plainer English than that. The intelligent minorities in order to make sure that the slobs stay on the right course. Come on. All right, so this was almost 100 years ago. This was in the 1920s. So think of these new techniques they had then. Now move that forward 100 years. What do you think they're doing now, and how much easier it has become for these people to sway public opinion, sway your thoughts, make you hate one group, make you love another group? it's only getting easier for them. I mean, like it says, you know, practice makes perfect, and these people have been at it for almost 100 years, if not longer. You know, so I'm just going to show you a few examples of some, you know, classic propaganda cases, just so you know you can get your head wrapped around what this looks like. You know, so here's one of my favorites. You know, the one about doctors who smoke. You know, telling, oh, this is the brand that most doctors smoke, or the brand that most doctors recommend. It's like, really? So they're putting this out there, telling people this to make them think that smoking is harmless. Like, hey, if all these doctors are smoking, you gotta smoke too. It's gotta be good. You know, so if you can't see through the lies on this one, then, you know, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. So moving on. The next one is also one of my favorites. All of these are pretty good examples of propaganda. So reefer madness. I think, you know, this was going on in the 60s. I'm not 100% sure, but it doesn't really matter. You know, so just look at this picture. I mean, it's associating cannabis with murder and insanity when it's actually quite the opposite. Cannabis has been proven to aid and possibly cure many diseases. I mean, the research is there, the case studies are done, peer-reviewed studies are done, everything that, you know, all these people want, technical issues and details, you can look it all up. There's tons of research out there that people have done that proves cannabis is very beneficial. You know, so moving on. This is probably one of the biggest propaganda cases, you know, at least in modern times, and it's with Iraq, leading up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003. All you heard was weapons of mass destruction, weapons of mass destruction, you know, WMDs, WMDs. We gotta get Saddam before he uses these WMDs or sells them to terrorists and whatever. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found in Iraq. End of story. And so now moving on to something that's going on right now here in Canada. You know, I'm talking about Stephen Harper and this big phony war on terror and all these new terror laws that they want to make, which basically don't do anything to terrorists but take away the rights of, you know, law-abiding Canadian citizens, citizens that have no connections to terror, don't do anything wrong, and, you know, they just want to work, make a living for their family, and enjoy the freedoms that, you know, Canada supposedly offers. You know, so here it says, you know, Harper is fighting against ISIS and terrorists, and they're doing everything to keep us safe. You know, but his actions say a totally different story. You know, Canada openly finances and arms these terror groups directly and indirectly, you know, through CSIS and other regimes like the Saudi regime. You know, this Saudi regime, you know, Canada is making multi-billion-dollar arms deals with these people, and they're turning around and giving these arms to the terrorists. You know, CSIS was just caught, one of their agents, well, maybe not a CSIS agent, but someone that works for a CSIS agent, was caught helping ISIS recruit women into ISIS. So, you know, how can you say on one hand that you're against terrorists and you're fighting terrorists and doing everything you can when our spy agency is helping the terrorists recruit? It's all a bunch of propaganda. You know, so these are just a few classic examples of, you know, governments or corporations lying to the people to get the people fooled to believe, you know, what their cause is and support, you know, new laws and la da da da, you know. So just want to leave you guys with a couple tips on how not to get fooled by the propaganda. Just a few questions that you should always ask no matter what you see, you know, whether they're telling you, oh, this shoe is awesome, all the good players are wearing it, or hey, smoke these smokes because all the doctors are smoking them, so they got to be good. Or the next time, you know, our government tries to ram through some secret terror bills that, you know, take away our rights, you got to ask some questions. So first off, who benefits? Who's benefiting from these new terror laws? Who's benefiting from these billion-dollar arms deals? Who's benefiting from the bombs that are being dropped? I know people are making money off of all this shit. And that's what you got to understand. You know, it's a big business. War is a huge business, just like cancer is a big business. So always ask who benefits. You know, you always got to look at both sides of the story. Don't just listen to this government. You know, go and read something from the news in Afghanistan. Go and read something from the news in Russia. Read something from the news in Iraq, in Africa, Latin America, wherever. You know, don't just stick to one source and be like, yeah, these guys know what's going on. Because no one can ever possibly know everything that's going on, and everyone has an agenda. You know, so also ask, who does said person work for, and who keeps them in power? Who are they trying to keep happy? You know, who puts money into their purses? You know, you gotta ask all these questions. What is this person's agenda? What are they trying to accomplish? And the one that will probably help you out the most, always do your own research. Don't just turn on the TV and listen to the guy in the news and be like, oh yeah, okay, he's right. I know what's going on. I'm informed now. You got to do your own research. And this goes back to a quote that I've always mentioned in some of my videos by William Cooper. You know, he's a man that predicted 9/11 a few months before it happened and then was gunned down in front of his house by the police a couple months after 9/11. Read everything, listen to everybody, don't believe anything unless you can back it up with your own research. You know, so don't be a fool. Don't buy into all the hype on this phony war on terror, the phony war on drugs. You know, start thinking for yourself, ask some questions, and do your own research. Thanks, and I'll see you guys next time.